Hey everyone, welcome back to another Mixed Faith Marriage Mastermind. I am Chris Rich. I'm a certified life coach. I'm the host of the Mixed Faith Relationship podcast, and I'm super grateful to be here with you today. And I'm thrilled to be joined by my dear friend and fellow coach, Suzette Halterman. Suzette is amazing. She brings so much wisdom and heart to this space, and I'm so grateful for her insights that she shares. And so, together, we're going to be diving into a topic that every relationship deals with, and that is defensiveness. So I think as humans, it's definitely something that all of us experience. So whether it's a conversation about church, about parenting, about beliefs, about boundaries, when we feel misunderstood or judged or overwhelmed or defensive, um, we become defensive. That can take over before we even realize what is happening. So today we're going to unpack what defensiveness really is, where it comes from, why it is such a normal part of being a human and in a mixed faith marriage, and also how we can respond differently when it shows up. So, Suzette, I'm guessing that you get defensive just like I do. Do you
Never,
have
ever.
Never. Oh, do you have any? I would love to hear your personal experience. How has defensiveness shown up for you personally in your marriage or family?
Yes, I've definitely become more aware of it. I think previously, before I kind of started working in the field of couples, I don't think I would have called myself a defensive person. And now I notice it all the time just because my awareness sensors about what I'm doing have gotten a lot stronger over the years. So I can see it in myself. I definitely get defensive. Um, I think defensiveness has a lot of different flavors to it. Mine is like not an aggressive, loud defensiveness, but it's definitely there. It's more of like a nice defensiveness, like, but let me explain my intentions. It's a lot of that. But yes, I definitely am defensive in my relationships. I'm defensive with my kids when they, come at me with some sort of feedback. So yeah, like you said, it's a normal part of being in marriage. And with my mixed faith relationship, yeah, there's been defensiveness on my end and also my husband's end. So it's definitely been there. What about you?
Oh, defensiveness and we go way back. And I think it's funny because I probably would have thought the same thing that I'm not defensive. I would defend myself against being defensive. And I could give you hundreds of examples of times where I got defensive. I was thinking about this just the other day. My husband and his friend were talking, and he said that neither of them have any interest in religion at all. And for some reason, they were talking about religion, and they asked me some questions about my beliefs. And immediately, I was like, I noticed that myself getting defensive and just like I shut down. I stopped making eye contact. I felt disconnected. It was like them against me kind of thing. And I really noticed how defensive I was. And then I reminded myself, like, my husband's not even one, he's not one to attack the church at all or me by any means. And also his friend is like the nicest guy. And so just reminding myself that no one was there to bash my beliefs, that, like we're on the same team. He has my back. And it was fascinating to watch that, even though I know that, to just see, and with parenting, oh my word, that's definitely something that comes up where, someone says something and we immediately make it mean something about us or something about them. So it's definitely, or I notice a lot of times if my kids are saying, you never, you always, or when people make assumptions about me, that's definitely something where I notice myself get defensive. And also, I just like the language that I use, knowing that that type of language a lot of times I'll get defensive when people say things like that to me, recognizing I bet if I'm using you always, you never, they're probably going to get defensive as well. So, yeah, I definitely get defensive. So, my next question, why do we get defensive?
Yeah, I think there's so much brain science to understand about how we work. And defensiveness is a self-protection mechanism, and our brains are just self-protection machines. They are trying to ensure our survival, and so they're going to protect us at all costs. And so the part of our brain, there's a part of our brain that's always scanning for safety, and it can assess perceived threat in like 1/8 of a second. I mean, it is so fast. And then it shifts into the gear of fight, flight, freeze, fix, right? And so defensiveness is just part of that. It's like self-protection. It's gotta keep myself safe from this perceived threat. And perceived is the key word there. And our brain just is not very, the part of our brain that is keeping us safe, it is just making rapid fire black and white decisions, right? Safe, not safe, safe, not safe. And so defensiveness comes into play when our brain detects threat in tone, in when it detects that somebody's judging us or has an agenda for us. Then our brain just does its black and white thinking of that's not okay, and boom, defensiveness rises up because it doesn't that part of our brain is just lightning fast. There's other parts of our brain that are slower that can take context into consideration, that can like look at other perspectives and realize that maybe we don't need to be defensive. Like you were saying, you like with your son like and your husband, like they're not actually my enemies here. Like that's the slower part of our brain that can rationalize. But defensiveness comes from the really quick acting part of our brain that's just lightning fast and black and white thinking. And it does that all day long. So it's such a battle. It's an uphill battle against our brains all the time.
Totally. And just to add what I was going to share, very similar to what you just said, that part of any time that our brain senses danger, our amygdala gets turned on, and that's the survival part of our brain. And I've shared this before. This is where I call it the monkey part of my brain, where I go, it's just doing anything it can to protect me. And I think it's really important to understand, like you were saying, it's automatic. This isn't something that we really have initially. It's not something we really have control over. If our nervous system senses danger, that amygdala or that monkey part of your brain is going to be switched on. And when you're in monkey mode, as I call it, you don't have access to the slower parts of your brain, like you were talking about, that it's physically not those times where it's like, I can't even think straight. We physically don't have the ability to use our prefrontal cortex the same time that we're using our amygdala. So I call the prefrontal cortex my CEO. And I know I've talked about this many times, but this is so important in understanding defensiveness. And I like to think of I kind of think of it like the nervous system's like a smoke detector. You were talking about those actual and perceived threats. So that when there's any smoke, so if there's like with a smoke detector, if there's an actual fire, that smoke detector is going to go off. And that's a good thing. We want that to go off because if there is danger, then by all means, we want to protect ourselves. So that smoke alarm's going off because there's a 5 alarm fire. And thank goodness for that. And this smoke detector it's very sensitive. So if you burn toast, it's also going to go off. So if there's just like a little hint of smoke in the air, the nervous system's like, danger, danger, there's smoke. And it doesn't know the difference between that actual threat. So your house being on fire, a bear chasing you, a car swerving toward you, and a perceived threat. So that could be an eye roll or a comment that someone made, or maybe someone doesn't respond to a text. That's the smoke from the toaster. And our nervous system sees that as it can't tell the difference between the two. So I think so important to understand that getting defensive initially is a biological thing that our nervous systems do. And I think with that, it is so important that we recognize that and just understanding like what are my triggers. I know for me, if my character is being questioned or I feel like my intelligence is being questioned, if I feel like someone misunderstands me or I'm being judged, that is my toaster with smoke. And that is definitely a trigger. So with my clients, I have them really pay attention. What are your triggers? Not with judgment, but just like, okay, this makes sense. This is an area where my nervous system smells smoke, and to pay attention to those things. Okay, so how can we pause or interrupt the cycle of defensiveness in the moment? Especially, we have these high stakes conversations about beliefs or values or parenting. Do you have any advice on that?
Yeah, well, if we use your fire alarm example, I think there is a spectrum of how sensitive people's fire alarms are to smoke detection, right? So like I tend to be more on the side of having a very, very sensitive smoke detector, right? So if I, like you said, if I feel like somebody is attacking my character or yeah, my intelligence or my decision making, like I am highly sensitive to that and my defensiveness goes up. Other people are not as sensitive. So it's for one, like knowing that about yourself. If you, and I call it porous, just like where what other people say, you absorb it and take it personal. Like your skin is so porous that it goes inside of you instead of being like, yeah, no, that's not true for me, or that's not an accurate representation of me and keeping it out. So I tend to be more on the porous side. I absorb um so one way to help your defensiveness is to practice like a separation. Like you can do it with a visual image, visualize like a fence or a wall or plexiglass between someone else and you when they're speaking at you so that it's like it bounces off you and you don't absorb it. If you tend to be kind of porous like me, where you take it in and then you feel defensive. So I do a lot of imagery practices where I'm like imagining some sort of barrier between me and other people as soon as I feel that defensiveness to kind of remind myself, like, nope, like I don't need to take in what they're saying. They're just saying stuff, right? I don't have to take it in as meaning something about me. So that's one thing I do. And the other thing is I remind myself that in the next 5 minutes, I'm going to make up stuff about other people too, right? So if they're saying something and I feel defensive, I just have to remind myself like their brain is just making up stuff with the information that they have. And I'm going to do that too. Probably in the next minute. I'm going to take the information I have and create meaning of it that is probably not 100% accurate or objective reality. It's just my brain is going to fill in the blanks and create meaning of things. So that helps me to not take things personal and get defensive when I realize like, eh, their brain is just doing their thing and my brain's going to do the same thing because that's what humans do. We create meaning out of everything. We make assumptions, we make judgment calls. Yeah, we do a lot of things and I am not above that. Like I'm human and I do that too. So those are some things that help me.
I love that. And I love that thinking of it being porous and I think there are certain times where we're more porous than others or different situations. So I love that plexiglass or like a safety invisible shield bubble or something. Um, so some of the things that I do, and one of my very favorite quotes, and I'm sure I've shared this on here before, is from Byron Katie. Defense is the first act of war. And that's when I notice myself getting defensive. Anytime I hear that word now, luckily that pops into my head. And so I just picture myself like grabbing my shield and my sword and my, like all the protective gear and that I would be using if I was going into war. And then asking the question, do I want to go to war right now? And there are times where I do, where it's like, this is important to me and these are my values and I feel like I do need to stand up for that. And then there's a lot of times, I think most times where it's like, no, this is not something that I need to pull my sword out for. So I think just asking myself the question, do I want to go to war right now? And then like when I see my cute 15-year-old on the other side of my defensiveness, I'm like, no, not I don't want to go to battle with him or my husband. So that's definitely something that slows me down. Um, Also, I love the question, uh, so with those two parts of the brain that I was talking about before, I like to ask myself, who's driving right now? Who's driving this bus? Is it my monkey? Am I in monkey mode or am I in CEO mode? And even if I can recognize that, you know what, right now I am in monkey mode, then that can sometimes that slows me down, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes I just plow forward, but recognizing like what mode am I in and recognizing if the other person I'm talking to, if they're in monkey mode too, it's not going to go well when we've got two monkeys, two people operating out of their monkey mode brains. Um, so that I think that can be super helpful. I also have another this I love this question because there's so many things that we can do. Another thing that I love when I recognize that I am defensive and that I'm trying to well, anytime I'm defensive, it's because my nervous system is trying to protect me. So I have what I call the safety sequence, and it is so simple, but it's seriously magical. And what that is, you ask two questions. So the first question is, am I safe? And by that, I mean empirically safe in this moment, not 5 minutes ago or 5 minutes in the future, but in this moment right now, in this conversation we're having, am I safe? And most of the time, the answer to that is going to be yes. And if it's not, then I want to do what I need to protect myself. But most of the time, it's going to be yes, I'm safe. So, question number two is, do I feel safe in my body? And that can be a very different answer. So that's, scanning your body. Are there any areas where you have muscle tension? Do you have like an upset stomach? Are you shaking? Are you sweating? Noticing like what's going on in your body? And a lot of times the answer to that question is no, I don't. So am I safe? Then do I feel safe in my body? And then dropping into your body and relaxing those areas that are not feeling safe. So if that's like a shoulder roll or a good deep breath or just I call it the rag doll where you just flop down for a second and creating that safety, even if it's for 2 seconds, that can I think of that as opening the door that my CEO can come back online. So I love that safety sequence and I use that multiple times every day. So
Which
those are
which reminds me of like I think even one of the most important parts of dealing with defensiveness is just take a pause, right? Like as soon as you notice it, you might have to just be like, I need a minute. Like don't reply. Don't open your mouth until you've had a minute to do some of these things, like to relax your body, to make sure you're safe, to throw up some imaginary plexiglass, to just get your mind in a better space, right? It's these conversations sometimes that are happening spontaneously we just get in them and what we really need is to slow down and just take a minute. So it's okay to say, I need a timeout before I respond. I need a break before I respond. To really get that, to do all these things that we're talking about it, because these all are slower parts of our brain that we have to access. We need a minute to do that and then come back into the conversation.
I love that. And I think I've noticed that when I've done that lately, instead of it causing more friction, it's like, okay, I'm owning that my nervous system is dysregulated right now. And then when I come back, it's like, okay, can you tell me again what you were saying? Because I noticed I got really defensive and I was in monkey mode. And then it's like, oh, okay, that's not what I meant, or that's not what he meant. So yeah, I love that taking a pause is so
It
important.
makes all the difference. And then I thought of one more tool, which if you've read the Let Them Theory by
I
Mel
love
Robbins.
that.
So you can also just tell yourself that, like, let them think what they think and say what they're going to say, and let them and let me practice not absorbing that. Because the let them is two parts. Like, let other people do their thing and let me manage myself in that moment. Let me take a break. Let me pause. Let me get myself centered. So it's just such a, I think that's why that book has been so popular. It's such a quick phrase. that you
Yeah.
can remember. Let them think that. Let them say that. Let me manage myself in response to that without adding fuel to the fire with my defensiveness and things like that. Let me practice those skills. And so, one more thing.
Such a great book if you're looking for a good read. Totally. So Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins. I
Mhm.
think I was number like 300 at the library and I finally got it. So I was excited. Okay, so my next question. How can couples move from defensiveness to curiosity and connection, even when they deeply disagree?
Yeah, well, I think that's a lot of the things we were just talking about. But you are going to disagree, and just remembering that our brains detect agenda and judgment. And I wish I remember the name of the person who did the research on that. I can't remember, but that somebody identified that our brains really are sensitive to agenda and judgment. So just recognizing that, like, although I might feel like our disagreement about beliefs is my spouse having an agenda that I change my mind, and they might have an agenda, right? And we're detecting that, we're picking up on that. They might be judging us, right? And our brains are super sensitive to that. They can detect agenda and judgment from a mile away. So I think in those moments, just recognizing that, like, ooh, my fire alarm is super sensitive to agenda and judgment, and that's happening right now. And so just I think just being aware of that and then trying to just remind it like, but I just want to be here and listen. I'm just going to listen. I'm not going to try to have agenda and judgment. I'm going to do my best not to give that back, right? We don't want to meet agenda and judgment with more agenda and judgment because then it's just agenda and judgment and brains firing and monkey brains and then it's like in the gutters and it's hopeless to get anywhere productive. So, yeah, just managing your own part. Like don't uh try to manage your own defensiveness, step out of conversation or say, hey, this never goes anywhere productive. Can we change this subject? Which I can't say enough about mixed faith marriages. You don't have to talk about these things that you disagree on. You're not going to see them. You're not going to see eye to eye. You're not going to agree. So stop trying. Move on to other topics. Like I don't know why a lot of mixed faith couples think that they have to talk about all these things. You don't. Just let each other have their own beliefs and talk about other things that are interesting to talk about and that don't have those flavors of agenda and judgment.
I think I love the quote, a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. And we so often it's just like, if I just say it this way, or if I have them read this conference talk, so that last one didn't work, but maybe this one will. I think recognize, I love that we don't, there, there are certain things that it's okay to just, we don't agree on this. And I think another thing too is when we're in a situation that's like, man, I can't believe they still don't agree with this. Why are we still surprised? Because it's like they haven't ever thought this, and I don't know why I think that they will, but I love asking myself that question. Why am I still surprised about this? Um,
I would love to know, do you and your husband talk about your different beliefs much? Because we don't. My husband and I don't, unless it's like if we're needing to solve a problem, like how are we going to handle this situation with the kids? We talk about it, but the goal is because we need to reach some sort of compromise or figure out a solution, but we're not like just talking about things church
yeah, we
related.
don't. I think in the beginning we didn't talk because I was too scared to rock the boat or um, yeah, but there's a lot of things. It's just like I know that those are his beliefs, and sometimes I'll say maybe not on religious things, but I try to. So our question that we were talking about, how do we move from defensiveness to curiosity, is focusing on that curiosity and like help me understand. So this is how I see it. Help me understand how what this looks like for you. I love there's an image of two individuals looking at a number. So the person over here sees a six, the person over here sees a nine. And it's like, this for sure is a six to me. But help me understand why is it that you see a nine? And then zipping our lips and
Mhm.
just being that we don't have to prove our point. We don't have to, a lot of times when we have to be right, all that gets us is disconnection. So it's like, do I really need to be right? I don't have to change my opinion, but if I have to be right, then that means that they're wrong, and that's just disconnecting.
Mhm.
So I think that yeah, we don't spend a lot of time on that, but focusing more on it depends on the topic.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
focusing more on, okay, this is what's going on. What do we want to do now? I see it this way, you say it this way. Where do we want to go from here? So,
Yeah. I totally agree with like it is important to have conversations to understand each other deeper. Like why
hmm
do you understand? And then also for functional purposes, how are we going to do that? But yeah, if you just find yourself of needing to be right, which is its own form of defensiveness.
yeah.
Needing to be right is totally one flavor. Like I said, defensiveness has many flavors. For some
hmm
people, it's like pure logic. Like, nope, here's this, that proof, and this evidence, and this evidence, and this evidence of why I'm right and you're wrong. Like, it's still defensiveness. It's just
Yeah.
in a different form.
Yeah, definitely. I love the different flavors. We have the chocolate flavor, we have the strawberry flavor of defensiveness, all the flavors.
Yeah.
I was also just going to say when we're trying to move from defensiveness to curiosity and connection, the only way that is going to happen is when our prefrontal cortex is invited to the party. If you're, so whatever you can do to create that calm, because if you are trying to protect yourself, that's not where the brain wants to get curious and compassionate and connect. That needs to happen when your CEO's online. So, and I think another thing too is that one of my favorite phrases that I'm saying often to my teenage son or is we're on the same team. Right now it feels like you're offense and I'm defense, but we're on the same team. So, and remembering, I think just identifying that I don't want to be going to war against you. Let's figure this out. So I've got a couple of phrases that I think that can help pull me back so I can be more connected. I think another thing too is in if you are having a conversation about religion, to sometimes my people have said they've made comments about religion that that they didn't like it or whatever. And it's easy to make it mean, okay, this is how they feel about religion, and to make it mean that's how they feel about me. But separating that, this is how they feel about religion. And maybe, like with my daughter, she does not let, well, none of them do, but she does not love the church. But I know she loves me. And separating, trying to clear that up and trying to keep that separate. And that can be that because am getting defensive, it's because I'm trying to protect me. But I don't need to protect myself against her because she loves me.
Yeah, I love that. And I think people whose fire, what do you,
Smoke detector.
detectors, um, are more sensitive, tend to do that more of kind of it, those conflate those meanings. Like, oh,
Yeah.
you said that about the church, and so that means something about me, right? If you're a person, and this is just something to know about yourself. If you have a really sensitive smoke detector, you're going to do that a lot. So part of your work to decrease your sensitivity is to practice that separating. Like just because they don't like the church or just because they love the church does not mean that they don't love me or whatever. Just practicing that separation to tone down your smoke detector a little bit so it's a little more reasonable.
And speaking of that, there are a lot of things that there are things that are going to make it more sensitive and less sensitive. So little things like if you haven't had a good night's sleep, you're probably going to be pretty defensive or ready to protect yourself. If you're not eating, if you're not moving your body, if you're not connecting with your people or with your community, those are all things that are going to make I call it the zone of tolerance. So when my CEO is available, that's when I feel safe and connected. And that's in what I call the zone of tolerance. And there are things I can do to grow that zone and make that so I have more access to my CEO. And there are things that are going to shrink that zone. So pain, sickness, trauma, stress, those are going to make that zone shrink. And if self-care, getting out in the sunshine, there's so many journaling, meditation, there's so many things that I can do to grow that zone of tolerance so I have more access to my CEO. And that
Mhm.
can make that smoke detector just and knowing that and have I think another thing too is just having when I notice myself being defensive to just get really curious about okay, for some reason my nervous system doesn't feel safe right now, and I don't have to beat myself up or to get defensive against my defensiveness, but just like, question what's going on for you, Chris Rich? What's happening right here? Is there a time, is this reminding you of a situation from the past where things didn't go well? It makes sense you're defensive. It's okay. I don't know that you want to go to battle, but just validating your experience and what's going on in your nervous system.
Which it reminds me of such an important point that our brains build on past experiences. So if you've
Yeah.
had conversations about faith and it has led to hurt feelings and fights and conflicts, your brain, as part of our super awesome self-protective mechanisms that our brain has, it remembers that and it builds on that and it says danger, danger, like this is scary. So it increases your sensitivity of your smoke detector. So just recognizing that, like, I am going into this conversation with a super heightened smoke detector because of all the accumulation of past experiences that have really heightened my sensitivity to that. And just really just being aware of that and doing what you can, like you said, the self-care, all the things that make you more able to kind of tone it back down a little bit.
Yeah, so important. I think of the nervous system as like a predictive machine. So it takes every conversation you've ever had, all the times where you felt safe and the times where you didn't, where your nervous system was trying to protect you, and it remembers that. So if there's any hint that things could go the way they did in the past, the nervous system's like, danger.
Mhm.
You gotta get ready to fight. So it's going to be ready to protect you. It is a fierce defender of to do everything to keep you safe.
Which
So,
is why I'm always amazed that humans can even do relationships because our brains really work against us like constantly because of our nervous system. But strengthening the part of you, the prefrontal cortex, strengthening the part that can just practice noticing and observing, is really what counters that. And it's just a muscle that you have to keep working at, like noticing and practicing regulating and practicing managing that work, letting your CEO brain uh, strengthening that more than your amygdala brain that doesn't
yeah,
need any strengthening. It does fine on its own.
it's good. It's got and I think I started to mention this earlier. So like paying attention, knowing are there conversations, are there topics, are there times that you notice your nervous system getting dysregulated and kind of instead of like it kind of becoming a detective that, oh, okay, here's another situation where I notice I get defensive. And to journal about it or to, one thing I recommend with my clients is I have them, to kind of become a detective and to write little notes like, okay, I get defensive in this situation, and then to pay attention what happens in my body, what are some of those signs and cues that I'm getting more and more dysregulated. So maybe for me it's my eye contact gets very intense, and I notice my heart rate increasing, my breathing changes. I might get, sometimes we kind of physically get a little bit bigger with our posturing, and just paying attention when and getting really familiar with what is happening, I think can be, and then it's like, oh, okay, I see I'm getting pretty defensive, and I don't have to judge it with, I can have so much compassion. And I think that having that awareness, I think, is so key. Anything else that you feel that would be helpful to add to this conversation?
I was just thinking about how it's easy to listen to things like that and be like, yes, my partner's so defensive. They need to learn these things. We cannot control our partners or anyone else's defensiveness. We cannot control their smoke detectors and how sensitive they are. But you can manage, you don't want to meet defensiveness with more defensiveness. That's just a recipe to um, activate things more, to escalate, right? So if your partner is defensive, just do your part to disengage. Do not engage with defensiveness because it's just going to bring out your own defensiveness and then it's just messy. So I think that's really important. Just, you know, d disengage from the conversation. Say, okay, that's fine. Don't engage with defensiveness because there's nothing good that comes from it. Um, wait until their defenses are back down and then you can talk about things later if you need to. But yeah, don't engage with defensiveness. Manage yourself.
And when we are managing ourselves, if we have our CEO online and you recognize that someone else is, just noticing that, like, okay, it looks like they are defensive. And I, so I love your comment of just don't engage with it. Also, just having a conversation. Help me. It seems like you're defensive right now. Do you want to, can you help me understand what's going on for you and not trying to fight back or to make it right, but um if they are in the space that they can talk, they might not be. And if they're not, then we want to just give it space. But sometimes help me understand what's going on for you right now. And that can open, having that curiosity can definitely help sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. It can if it can definitely help them lower their defensive when they see that it's not needed because it's not going to be met with more defensiveness
Yeah.
for sure.
And that might be a great time to say, you know what, just as a reminder, we're on the same team. Let's figure we're not opposing teams. We're on the same team.
Yeah.
But well, I just so this is something that I am looking at in myself often. And I think the big thing, Suzette and I, we are in the trenches with you. We are trying to figure this out ourselves. And we're hoping that some of these little nuggets that we've given you today can help you when you notice that you're getting defensive and hopefully we've given you some tools that can help you to deal with that situation when it comes up next time, because I promise it will.
It'll happen 10 times before the day's out, I'm sure, for me.
I'm sure. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Well, that's everything we have for you. And we look forward to seeing you next month for another great mixed faith marriage mastermind. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.